For me, this isn't just about school boards. School boards are a fundamental part, some might say the largest part, of traditional American public education governance. But my own discontent with school boards is only part of my larger discontent with those traditional governance and structural arrangements that we've been living with for considerably more than a century now in this country. Let me first characterize those arrangements and then say why I think they are generally obsolete even when they're not dysfunctional, and then talk a little more specifically about elected school boards within that. The traditional governance arrangements, though they differ some from place to place, generally display four pretty common characteristics. First, while formal constitutional responsibility for educating kids belongs to states, the actual delivery of that education has been delegated to local education agencies, typically called districts, which are geographically defined, most often contiguous with the boundaries of a city, town, county, or other municipality. And kids who live in that district are generally educated in public schools operated by that district. Everybody in the room knows this. Second, though states have shouldered some responsibility for financing public education, usually by declaring some sort of minimum or foundation level of per pupil spending, nevertheless, sizable portions of education financing are locally generated through property taxes, bond levies, and things like that. And those amounts, as we all know, differ from place to place within the same state, as well as quite a lot from state to state. Third, at both the state and local levels, public education usually has separate governance arrangements from most of the rest of state and municipal governance, most commonly by being answerable to a separate board of education, not just locally, but also at the state level. Most of those boards elected, sometimes appointed, but it is not usually answerable directly to the governor, mayor, county commission, city council, or whatever. Historically, I believe this was intended to recognize the uniqueness of education and to buffer it from conventional politics and patronage. Fourth, overall education governance has at least 3 layers, often 4, sometimes 5, involving decisions made at and funding arising from Washington, from the state level, from the local level, sometimes decisions made at the building level, and not infrequently at intermediate levels within a big district or regional units that come between districts and states. You could get up to 6 levels of decision making in the governance structure of public education in more than a few places. I've come to believe that whatever sense this setup may have made 50 or 100 years ago, it doesn't make much sense today. Indeed, I don't think any of those 4 elements make sense today. We now live in a highly mobile society and a highly metropolitanized society, more than 90% of us in metropolitan areas. We are no longer a country of small towns, nor do we have a stable population. There is no reason for education to be different or differently governed or differently financed from Arlington County to Prince George's County or even Montgomery County, where I live and vote. Much less from Arlington to Alexandria to Fairfax, or from Brookline to Newton, or from Evanston to Winnetka. What's more, with kids attending school across district lines in many places, attending charter schools, attending virtual schools that may operate statewide or multi-state, why are we trying to fit these educational realities and funding flows into the traditional municipal system? If a kid lives in Dayton but attends the Ohio Virtual Academy or wants to attend Kettering High School in a neighboring suburb, or splits his time between the Ponitz Career Technology Center operated by the school system and the Sinclair Community College, who exactly is responsible for that kid's education and for paying for it? Why should it be the Dayton Public School District as traditionally defined just because that kid's parents happen to live within the city of Dayton that month? Why does that make the Dayton Public Schools the responsible agent for this kid who doesn't attend their schools? I don't think separate governance makes much sense either when we're beginning to understand, when I think we all understand, that developing kids doesn't just involve their cognition, but also their physical health, their social development, their character, and so many other things. Why is education governance divorced from health and welfare and recreation and all those other things? As for the multi-layer decision-making structure, some called it a layer cake, others call it a marble cake. Well, in its way faithful to American federalism, yes, it mainly serves nowadays, it seems to me, to pull schools apart in response to funding and regulatory streams that emanate from different levels of government, to foster bureaucracy, confusion, and tension, and maybe most importantly, in a reform era, it pretty much gives every level a functional veto over reforms initiated at every other level. It doesn't much matter whether a state wants to participate in Race to the Top, for instance, when each district in that state decides for itself whether to sign up to take part in that program. Conversely, a district may wish to bring Teach for America, let's say, to town, but in fact the alternative certification arrangements that govern that district are made at the state level. And I haven't even mentioned NCLB and all the confusions and limitations that flow from the federal level into all the other levels. As for elected school boards, I'm certainly willing to grant that in some suburbs, possibly including Montgomery County, Maryland, and maybe Edison, New Jersey, and in some small towns and rural communities, the elected local school board may still consist of selfless community leaders like Chris and Jean, who want only the best for kids. In urban America, however, I defy you to point me to more than 10 examples in the entire country of local boards that over a prolonged period, let's say a decade, are able to devise and deliver and stick to a child-focused, quality-driven reform agenda for their schools. All the time I run into excellent, forward-looking superintendents who are undermined, shackled, and distracted by 7- and 9-member elected boards consisting of 7 or 9 separate agendas. And too often I find those 7 or 9 people consisting largely, if not entirely, of 3 types. There's the aspiring politician for whom the school board is a step toward the legislature or the sheriff's office or wherever. Then there's the single-issue zealot bent on a particular curriculum, neighborhood, patronage arrangement, weird cause, or adult interest group, often tugged and manipulated by outside constituencies, including but by no means limited to the teacher unions. And finally, there's the vengeful former employee of the district itself, bent on getting the superintendent or somebody else fired and replaced. This is no good way to run a railroad, folks, much less to direct our children's education. We need to find a better way. I'm not ready today to spell out the alternative, but I am definitely ready to declare that we have an enormous problem in need of fresh alternatives, not in need of more of the same. Thank you very much.